Araling Panlipunan, Kapitong Baitang. Mga pangunahing relihiyon sa Silangang Asya. Hinduismo ang pangunahing relihiyon sa India. Naniniwala sila sa mga Diyos-Diyosan na mula sa iba't ibang likha ng kalikasan. Subalit ang kanilang paniniwala ay napalitan ng pagsamba kay Brahma. Vedas ang banal na kasulatan ng mga Hindu. Tinuturo ng Vedas kung papaano magkaroon ng mahaba at mabuting buhay ang tao. Mga paniniwala ng mga Hindu. Una, naniniwala sa pagkakabuklod-buklod at pagkakaisa ng mga bagay sa kapaligiran na nagdadala ng pagkakaisang espiritual. Pangalawa, naniniwala sila sa pagmamahal, paggalang at pagrespeto sa lahat ng mga bagay na may buhay, espiritu o kaluluwa. Pangatlo, sumasamba sila sa iba't ibang uri at anyo ng Diyos na tinatawag na polytheism. Meron silang 330 milyong Diyos. Bahagi ng kanilang paniniwala ang reinkarnasyon, na kung saan ang namatay na katawan ng tao ay sisilang na muli sa ibang anyo, paraan o nilalang. Kalima, naniniwala rin sila sa karma. Ang karma ay pagkakaroon ng gantimpala kung kabutihan ang ginawa sa kapwa at pagdurusa naman kung di mabuti ang ginawa sa kapwa. Pang-anim, naniniwala ang mga Hindu na mga tao ay dapat na magsikap sa buhay at ito ay dapat na inaalay sa Diyos anuman ang kanyang antas sa lipunan.
Into writing the hundreds of tales about their gods into texts called the Vedas. These texts became the basis of the oldest living religion in the world, Hinduism. Hinduism. Hindus view the universe as an immense space of indescribable dimensions that comprise a series of cycles of various lengths. For them, a kalpa, which is as long as a day in the life of Brahma, the god of creation, lasts 4.32 billion of our years.
Wow, that's over 1 billion years between breakfast and lunch.
It's also a lot of time for things to happen. You see, Hinduism and its traditions are so rich that there is no one work that can hold all the stories and teachings it comprises. It is said there are 330 million gods and goddesses, and countless stories about them all. In these stories, the gods evolve or lose some of their powers, or disguise themselves, change into animals, provide light for other gods, and so on. But to keep things simple, let's talk about 3 of the major gods. First, we have Brahma, the god of creation. Traditionally depicted as having 4 heads and 4 arms. Then there's Shiva, who is often depicted as having 3 eyes. Shiva represents destruction and transformation, and many other things. He's the master of yoga, bestows mercy and compassion, and is associated with music and dance and more. But back to Brahma for a moment. Some traditions teach that Brahma did not have a mother, but was born at the beginning of the universe, in a lotus blossom on the navel of another god.
Ang Buddhism ay tinatag ni Siddhartha Gautama, isang batang prinsipe. Ninais niya na maging asitiko upang danasin ang katotohanan ng buhay. Isinukod niya ang karangyaan, luho at masarap na buhay. Iniwan ng pamilya at naglakbay hanggang matuklasan ang kaliwanagan. Kaya ang Buddhism ay nangangahulugan ng kaliwanagan. 623 BCE. Mahayana Buddhism, kinilala bilang Diyos si Buddha na tagapagligtas. Niyakap ito ng mga taga-silangang Asya tulad ng China, Korea, Japan at Vietnam sa Timog Silangang Asya. Theravada Buddhism, kinikilala si Buddha bilang guro at banal na tao. Kinilala ito ng mga bansa sa Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos at Cambodia. 4 na paniniwala ng Buddhism. Una, ang buhay at pagdurusa ay hindi mapaghihiwalay. Pangalawa, pagnanasa ang sanhi ng pagdurusa. Pangatlo, mawawala lamang ang pagdurusa kung aalisin ang pagnanasa. Pangapat, maalis ang pagnanasa kung susunod sa 8 landas at matatamo ang tunay na kaligayahan o nirvana.
In the year 563 BC, a man brought a new perspective to things in India. And his ideas helped many people who were suffering under the caste system. This man was called Siddhartha Gautama. But in time, he came to be known as Buddha. The young Siddhartha was the main heir to a small kingdom. His father loved him greatly and did not want him to know suffering. The young prince was isolated in a wonderful palace, surrounded by various pleasures, servants, and delightful music. In this way, his father tried to hide aging, sickness, and death from him. But Siddhartha suspected that there was more to life than his luxurious prison. And since he was a restless young man, he began to leave the palace to see his subjects. The first time that he went forth, he saw an old, stooped man. Another time, he saw a sick man. And on another occasion, he saw a dead man. Siddhartha was dismayed. He didn't know about the suffering people had to endure in the real world. He decided not to return to his life of fantasy. Instead, he abandoned all his wealth to meditate on the suffering of people in the world. Siddhartha went deep into the woods and lived without a home. He shaved his head and wore nothing but rags. Siddhartha practiced something called meditation. Using the power of his mind, he slowed down his breathing, only ate a tiny bit of food, and could remain virtually motionless for hours or even days. He meditated to learn the mysteries of the universe. He spent years meditating, eventually learning to meditate more deeply than any other man. One day, something happened. It was like a great light turned on in his soul. Siddhartha left to tell his people of his great discovery. From that day on, he was known as Buddha, which means the enlightened one. All suffering is born from the desire to acquire something. If we manage to stop desiring, we will also stop suffering. Buddha taught that by controlling one's desires, a person could become their own master. So that when one dies, one will no longer need to be reborn as something else. And one's soul will reach nirvana, where suffering and ailments do not exist. This means a person's soul could remain in a state of peace forever.
Ang Shintoismo ay nangangahulugang daan o kaparaanan ng Diyos. Tinatawag na kami ang mga Diyos na may kapangyarihang likas. Nananahanan ng mga Diyos na ito sa ilog, puno, bato, bundok, buwan at araw. Sinasamba rin ng mga Shinto ang namatay nilang mga kamag-anak, ninuno at emperador hanggang sa pagtatapos ng ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig. Sila ay sumasamba sa kanilang mga templo at dambana dahil sa paniniwalang dito nananahanan ng kanilang Diyos. Binubuo ang paniniwala nila ng mga pagdarasal, pagpalakpak, pag-aalay at pananampalataya. Ang pinakadakilang Diyosa ng Shintoism ay si Amaterasu, ang Diyosa ng araw. 4 na paninindigan, paniniwala ng Shinto. Una, tradisyon at pamilya. Ang pamilya ang kanilang pangunahing prioridad. Pangalawa, pagmamahal sa kalikasan. Ang kalikasan ay may malakas na koneksyon sa mga Diyos, kaya ito'y binigyang halaga. Pangatlo, kalinisan. Binubuo ito ng pang-pisikal at pang-spiritual na paglilinis. Pang-apat, Matsuri, pagpuri sa mga Diyos at sa mga sinaunang spiritu.
So what exactly is Shinto? Well, it's the largest religion in Japan, practiced by an estimated 80% of the population. Back in the 6th century, indigenous Japanese people invented the word Shinto to distinguish their already existing faith from Buddhism, which was spreading throughout the region. Over time, Shinto and Buddhism came to coexist peacefully. Shinto is considered more a way of life rather than a specific set of beliefs or worship of a central deity. Most Japanese people identify as both Buddhist and Shinto. So how can someone follow 2 religions at once? Well, Shinto doesn't have many of the characteristics associated with religion. Unlike Christianity or Buddhism, it has no official founder or sacred text. Shinto does not try to explain the world in a sense of right and wrong, and thus there are no Shinto preachers or missionaries. The only goal of Shinto is to be in touch with kami, or spiritual energy, through sacred rituals. These include weddings, funerals, worship at a shrine or at home, and huge festivals. The word Shinto means way of kami. Kami is extremely complex, but basically they are sacred spirits that exist in earthy objects like mountains and trees, and in concepts like fertility. Kami also has an ancestral form as humans become kami after they die. The sun goddess Amaterasu is the most important kami. In Japanese mythology, the royal family is thought to be descended from Amaterasu, beginning with the first emperor, Jimmu. It was thought that prayers and offerings to kami spirits at Shinto shrines and festivals will wash away evil spirits and thus purify a person or object. This process is the lifeblood of the Shinto practice, happening on a daily, weekly, seasonal, lunar, and annual basis.